footstool because I'm too short. Thank you. Hi, everyone. Okay, I guess you can see me better now that I have assistance. So my name is Arisa Ugu. I'll be moderating the panel called The Future is Female, Investing in Education for Girls. Now, I wrote a book called The Smart Money Woman that explores personal finance from an African perspective. It's their pain points when it comes to their personal finances. And then I turned the book into a TV series that is now streaming on Netflix. So I'm very passionate about using storytelling as a tool to teach. So I'll start with a short story. I went to boarding school when I was 10 years old in Nigeria, and it was a more expensive school than my parents could reasonably afford at the time. So it was a sacrifice. But I remember a conversation my dad had with some of his friends that stuck with me because of, the context of it. He informed them that I would be attending this expensive private school, and some of the comments that were made were around, why would you waste that kind of money on a girl? Save that one for your son. Why can't she go to a public school? She's just a girl. You can invest your money in other things. These comments stemmed from the belief that a girl's education is less valuable than a boy's. And these were educated men. I'm lucky that my father believed that all children, girls or boys, deserved a quality education. But it does make me think about the fact that if educated people have this mindset, how deeply rooted is this belief system in communities where the parents don't have a formal education or access to the same opportunities? I was reading a report recently about why it was important to invest in education for girls. And in educating girls, it said, it's good to educate girls because it improves the lives of future generations, because educated women invest 90% of their wealth into their families, and that is more than double that of their male counterparts. I smiled because I thought of my African mother and all the sacrifices she made to this day for her family. But it also hits me how problematic this can be when the goal is to change and close the gender gap through education. The reality is, from a young age, African men are told that they're going to be responsible for the financial futures of their family. So they're more likely to be landlords, they're more likely to chase assets. But if we keep telling women that their role is just as nurturers, even when they have the skill set and they start earning more, what happens is they don't build any assets that can protect them in the future. And women need economic empowerment because they're the most vulnerable in society. When divorce happens, when wars happen, when the husband loses their job, and they can't sustain, the family anymore. So there are deep structures of gender inequality that are rooted in misogyny, and we have to be cognizant of the fact that even when some of the institutions that are supposed to protect and provide education are often reproducing those deep, deep-seated gender inequalities hardwired into our societies. Without shifts in these belief systems, changing girls' education will continue to face challenges. This panel will discuss the transformative power of investing in education for girls, the obstacles and the practical strategies that we can employ to accelerate the investment in education for girls in Africa. The session will examine emerging best practices and innovations that help close the gender gap with a view to addressing some of the logistical and cultural changes that face girls' access to quality education. I will now introduce my esteemed panelists, Simi Nwogu, CEO GA Africa, Vongai Nyahunzuvi, Head of Africa and Chief Network Officer, Teach for All. Lady Hakizamana, CEO AIMS. and Adebola Williams, Chairman, AW Networks, and co-founder, Red Africa. Thank you so much. Hi, okay. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm really excited to discuss this important topic with you guys. I wanted to start by you all introducing yourselves and telling us how the work that you do helps to advance investing in the girl child's education. Press the button.
Can you hear me now? Yeah. Okay. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Simi Nwogugu. I'm the CEO for Junior Achievement Africa, and we empower young people for a successful future by teaching them entrepreneurship and employability skills.
My name is Vongai Nyahunji, and I work at Teach for All. And the whole idea behind our work is that for girls' life to be truly transformed, it has to be everybody's business. And I'll expand that as we go along the way. We just do this by placing some of the most promising graduates in places where girls are particularly marginalized. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lydia Kizimana, and I'm very pleased to be here today. I'm representing the Africa Institute for Mathematical Sciences, and what we do is very simple. We look for the brightest mind in math and science in Africa, and we give them the opportunity to work on research in AI, mathematical modeling in climate science, and making sure that they are discovering breakthrough discoveries. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Adebola Williams. I am a media entrepreneur. For work, I run a political consultancy. And for passion, I use storytelling to shape our world. Particularly on this panel, I'm very excited, particularly by the last speaker who talked about the history and story of women, because I recently wrote this book called African Power Girls, which I wrote for my goddaughters. I have 3 goddaughters, and I'm used to a world where people tell women what they can be and cannot be. People tell women what they should do and cannot do. And I realize that it comes from a place of lack of knowledge, because you do not know women who have been, women who are great, women who have gone to wars and conquered territories that men cannot go. And I thought that my goddaughters and my own daughter eventually deserve to live in a world where they know they've come from a lineage of great women. And so I wrote this book for them, and I hope to talk more today on glorifying stories that create multiplication for great African girls.
So we spent at least a decade talking about investing in education for African girls. We know that it's important, but I want each speaker to talk about what are the things that act as obstacles to reaching this goal. If you can each tackle that.
You mentioned one of them in your introduction, which is girls being seen as not good investments for education, because after all, they're only good for marriage. In the work that we do, we typically have boys and girls in our programs, and we realized that, especially in the entrepreneurship programs, when I was running the Nigeria operation, I realized that there were girls who were timid at the beginning, but by the end of the program, they were actually running the companies, and the best companies were sometimes the ones who were led by the girls. And so what we did was we put together a program specifically for girls that we would bring them from all across the country for specific leadership work. And it was there that I realized something Olivia said very powerfully, that girls don't live single issue lives. And we try to treat this as a single issue, but it's not. There are multiple layers that actually block the investment in education for girls. One is the realization that girls that are educated are more empowered, and you have men in their lives that may not want that empowerment. One of the sobering things for me was after a few years of doing this leadership camp for girls, I would have a girl who would write me a note that I don't want to go back home because my father is a molester. How do you deal with that? And so we realized that we had to start collaborating with other organizations. And Kemi Ibru is here. We brought in organizations that dealt with sexual reproductive health, rape, even personal hygiene and things like that, just to empower them in all the areas of their lives. So for me, I think the solution is building an ecosystem that involves not just the schools, but the local government, the police, knowing that when an incident is reported, investigate, prosecute, so that the girls don't feel like they have to be silent when these things happen. The schools and the NGOs, teachers, the collaboration in bringing these technologies into the classroom that support the girls. And finally, even the local government leaders in them understanding that investing in these girls means investing in future leadership for the community. We've seen communities where we work where when the girls are empowered with entrepreneurship and employability skills, they actually come back and they do social impact projects that are beyond them. So there is a natural nurturing aspect, yes, to girls, but how do we let the leaders of the community understand that investing in them actually brings that out more in them? And then finally is the perception of why should I send my girl to school when there are other things I need her to do at home for me? We have a lot of people with, someone actually said to me, we have a lot of people with degrees that are jobless and they are roaming the streets. Why not keep her at home to learn the skills that, trading, hair braiding, things that will bring money into. So for us at Junior Achievement, it's very important for us to be able to educate the parents that, we do entrepreneurship program, we do employability programs that will actually equip your girls so they're not just getting an education, they're also getting, education about livelihoods and that will come back and support you in the end. So it's important for us to be able to educate parents as to the economic viability of education by putting these programs into schools. Thank you.
Thank you, Simi. I think when you were speaking, I thought, wow, there are so many things that are aligned. And I've been inspired by listening to all the speakers in the keynote because there's a golden thread in terms of what has been going on. So in our work, we've seen that there are so many hindrances, but I'll share three in particular. I think the first one was almost making this assumption that it's somebody else's responsibility to deal with the issues that are affecting the girls to educate. So what we saw that through what we call fellows, so we, like I said, attract some of the most promising graduates, place them in high-need schools. We realized when they went to teach in some of these schools, they realized that sometimes when they went to the head teacher or speaking to the teachers around, I'm finding these issues in my classrooms. Initially, there was a lot of pushback around, we don't know what to do this, go to the government to come up with solutions. However, what they started doing, they said, it's my business to make sure that I do things that will help the child to educate. One particular example, there was this lady called Bosede, who was working she's now a Teach for Nigeria alumni. So in one of their communities, she realized that some of the girls were having menstrual issues, but they were not realizing that I've actually started a menstrual period. So for Bosede, initially she started by thinking, how do I maybe think about bringing pads, etc. But one thing that she realized is that, I can use the community as a source of power. So she went to the elders in the village and said, hang on, we're having these issues around menstrual health because the menstrual hygiene issue hasn't started yesterday. And what was incredible is the wisdom and the solutions that came from that society. There wasn't anything that was shipwrecked from another abroad or from another place, but these women were able to come up with solutions that ended up helping girls in this particular community. And not only that, so when Bosede then realized that, I can mobilize men, I can mobilize boys, I can mobilize the government, etc. But from her perspective, it wasn't the issue of, I'll let other people handle this. And then as she did that, she realized there was the role that head teachers could play. So as she started talking to a head teacher, it became a ripple effect because they had all these examples around, this is what is working for us. And different head teachers and others started talking around the communities. So one thing is that what's absent is that people are thinking, you know what, it's somebody else's problem. It's not just about menstrual health. There are so many issues that are affecting the girls. And then the second thing that has probably made us still remain in decades back is the issue that there are so many initiatives. I don't think there's a lack of initiative within the girls' education space. I almost say sometimes if you throw a stone, it will hit on an initiative of someone who's working around girls. So if those things were working, probably we did not need to be here. But one thing that we've realized is that, you know what, things are so isolated. If I give you, for example, right now we're in this room talking about girls' education, but if I ask a question around how many teachers are in this room, probably we'll see none. How can we talk and have conversations around education, but we do not have teachers putting their voices who are working with the students? If you go to a teacher's college, I can guarantee you that the curriculum where teachers are trained, it's silent on the issues that are affecting girls. There's everything else around the pedagogy of teaching, etc. But when you think, what does it mean? If you look at pre-service, in-service training again, how we even recruit teachers, for example, these issues are silent. So we then expect miraculously that when all these policies are put in place, all these things will come together. So one thing that I think has really come in the way is how can we ensure that there is some jointedness and some golden threads from, you know, whether it's the policy, how we train people who stand in front of the children and everything else. The last thing that I would probably share that I think has really come in the way, there are issues around mindset that we continue to perpetuate. You know, this other time, I was born, bred, raised in Zimbabwe, right? And I have got, there were people around me who would advocate for things around girls, but when it comes to making some decisions, they would say, you know what, the thing is you're so feminine, I think someone has said that, so I'm not going to kind of hammer that, but some of the mindsets that we have across table, they are still perpetuating those very mindsets which we want to run away from. I think that's when that first panel came, I asked Claire around how are you ensuring that there's no glass cliff? Because, so what has been happening is that, you know what, I live in England and I really struggled as a high fly, like as someone who was ambitious career-wise, because when it comes to childcare, I almost felt like I had to choose being a mother or being a high-flying person. So again, when I think about what is happening on our continent is, yes, we are pushing all these things where these mindsets have been engraved for years and for generations. So it's going to take, it's systemic, and it's going to take years. And one of the requests to philanthropists in this room is that have patience, because this is a long-term issue. It will take time. Sometimes when people give money, they want solutions here and now, but it's going to take, sometimes we might not realize the benefits in this generation. So patience, patience, patience.
So there are many hindrances, and I just want to focus on one, which is representation at all levels. Let me talk about a personal story. I started my first company 17 years ago. It was selling used books that I have read my entire life. I loved books. I had more than 300 books in my home, and I started selling them for less than $1. 3 months, all of the books were gone. Then I thought to myself, maybe there is a business opportunity there. I started reading about the publishing industry, and the more I read about it, the more discouraged I was, because it was very high capital intensive. So I went on Google and started looking for partners. I found one partner, Pearson Education. I wrote to them. I said, my name is Lydie, this is my passion, I love reading, I want to bring you to Rwanda. Guess what? Someone responded 3 weeks after, and we started a conversation, a year of back and forth. They even invited me to London to come and pitch. But my husband, when I received that ticket, was like, are you sure this is not a Nigerian scam? Sorry for my Nigerian friends, but this is what happened. So fast forward, we wrote these books. The Rwandan government decided to change the language of instruction from French to English. And guess what? I was there working with this publishing company from the UK. The opportunity that we had at that time to publish books in this country in English and Kinyarwanda as well was huge. We were able to bring young people into this business to understand, the logistics side of it, the publishing side of it, the editing, the writing side of it. So it was very, very exciting. Why am I telling you this? Representation matters. It's extremely important to have some representation at all levels, to be on the decision-making table and make the decision. Extremely important. So fast forward to my work at AIMS. As I said, AIMS is the Africa Institute for Mathematical Sciences. We train at the master's and PhD level in many different fields. We've been in business for the past 19 years. We've trained more than 2,800 young people. 38% of them are women. I'm very, very proud of it. 38% are women. But guess what? It's very hard to find these excellent, excellent women to come into this very high-level fields. So what are we trying to do? We're trying to build a pipeline. But by building the pipeline, when you go to secondary schools, let me ask you another question. By show of hands, how many of you have been traumatized by your math teachers? How many of you are afraid of mathematics? Exactly. Many, many, many of our children, our girls, hate mathematics. Why? Because we have teachers who are making these courses super, super difficult. We want to demystify the teaching of mathematics, and that's what we're doing at AIMS. Demystifying it, making it fun, making it attractive, bringing young people with dreadlocks, with piercing, who love math, because role modeling is important. It's important. Representation is important. Extremely important. So at AIMS today, we have started this Girls in the Mathematical Sciences program. It's a 9-month program with high school girls. We bring them for 9 months. Most of the time it's online. And what do we do with them? We pair them with mentors, astronauts, physicists, data scientists from all over the world to identify problems, work on specific problems, work on how do you identify a problem. So we pair this group of women and they work together for 9 months with the hope that at the end of this program, they will pursue careers in mathematical sciences because it's important. It's extremely important.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you. I think that, the lag might have been caused from a few gaps in information. And that is why storytelling becomes very important. The case for educating girls is not a woman issue. It's actually a business case. The United Nations says that sub-Saharan Africa loses $95 billion annually because of gender gap. There is a report by McKinsey that says that companies with more women, about 25% of women on the executive team, have a higher chance of survival and success. Another report by the University of Glasgow says 30% chance of being more successful than a male-driven business. 1% increase in women education leads to 0.37 growth in GDP. There is profit, there is money, there is prosperity for the continent if women go to school. Educated women raise healthier children. When women get money, they invest the money in a larger pool in their community, amongst their networks, and not just in their family. President Banda told me a story recently of how when she got her Nobel Prize, I think 50 or 100,000, and another man got half of that. She said to me in an interview I had with her for African Power Girls, that she went to him and said, give me your half, let me use it. And he said, no, you take your half, I take mine. She said they met a couple of years after. And the man said, what did you do with your money? She said, oh, I built a foundation and I became president. Well, he said, you know, I just went into the shop, I bought a few things, and the rest is history. There is credible research that shows that empowering women, educating girls, leads to prosperity on our continent. Now, men work by profit. Men work by clear what is the need for me. We need to begin to tell more stories that show men why they need to collaborate with women. Because more often than not, it is been, shown, demonstrated that you might not get that opportunity because a male counterpart will probably just give it to another male counterpart. I recently watched a series called Partner Track. If you haven't seen it, please watch it. And the girl was working hard to be a partner. She was doing all the work, but the boy was playing golf, was having whiskey with the partners, and he was doing some work. The boy did work, but you see, that part of the social skill took him into rooms that perhaps didn't take the girl. And so I always say to women, for you to also ensure that girls have education and funding for education of girls, how are women coming together to form the girls' club, to create ladder for other women to get into the rooms so that when they're making the decision in IFC and the World Bank, it automatically would have women on those rooms, on those tables, and not just men being the decider of where the monies go. So for girls to get education, there are certain things that women must do, but so I don't hog the mic, I will come back and talk more about that.
Thank you so much, Dewala. I love that the central theme here was that knowledge is important, so we have to invest in girls, but when we're talking about girls, there are outside influences that hinder the progress of investing in girls, and we need to consider that when we're making decisions. So I want to talk about one of the biggest things that hinders the scale or the impact of our process of investing in girls' education in Africa especially, funding. Now with Smart Money Woman, I know how challenging it is, and it's a for-profit thing that has a double bottom line. So when I'm going to investors and trying to raise capital to say, listen, this is going to teach financial literacy through storytelling, and it's going to do so on a big platform because it's pairing financial education with entertainment. And I know how hard it is to convince investors that this is something that they can put money in because they can make a profit and they can also impact girls in a very big way. Simi, what are the challenges that you feel you face in your industry with raising capital to fund these programs that are focused on girls?
Oh, gosh, how many minutes do we have? So I'll come at it from a positive mindset, which is that we've been able to raise funding where we've been able to demonstrate the impact of the funding. And it goes back to what Adebola was saying about making sure that you're able to speak the numbers to the men. And really to anyone who's funding, everyone is really concerned about impact. What will I see out of this? So for those who are struggling to raise money, it's really going back to understanding why you're doing this and being able to tell the story of the impact of the vision. I think about Liddy contacting Pearson. I mean, how many people write Pearson and Pearson engages them? It's probably because before she actually contacted them, she had her story straight. She had this is what I want to do and this is the impact. It still took a year of back and forth, but she still spent that time in outlining what the vision is, what the story is, and then in getting them to come on board. On the other side, which is something that Uche mentioned earlier, is the cumbersome process. of getting funding. You have a lot of people who are very passionate and who believe that, you know, why can't they just see my passion? Why can't they just fund me? But you do have to go through that process, unfortunately, of putting your, you know, dots on your I's and on your crosses on your T's. And what I would advise people who are in this position to do is to start small, and then when you start having the impact, start having the stories, to really invest in telling those stories. It's something that I learned the hard way, because running Junior Achievement for years, I just believed all the money should be pumped into the programs. Give me money, let me pump it into reaching as many students as I could. And then there were organizations that were not even reaching 1/10 of our students who were being announced that, oh, they got this huge funding. And I'd be like, how? And it's like, oh, they have this wonderful glossy video of a story that they've told about impact. And I had to learn, okay, we need to invest in telling stories, in showing, demonstrating impact. So that's really what I would advise, is really to get that audited financial statement, is to get a board, a structure that will make you credible when you go to the funders, and really to invest in telling the stories of impact as you go along.
Thank you so much, Simi. So Vongai, investing in girls' education. Education just sounds like such a blanket, you know, statement. How do we measure the impact of investing in education for the girl child? And which global strategies can we adopt that have been successful at furthering the goal of closing the gender gap through education? How can we replicate and scale these?
No, thank you so much. As I was thinking of what's the best way to respond to that question, because sometimes when you hear the word measurement, you almost want to run away, personally, right? So I wanted to start by telling a story, right? So I am one of 5 children. I grew up very, very poor. 2 of my sisters got pregnant by the age of 15. I was on path to go down that route until a certain teacher, one day I went to school after attending a wedding of my cousin, and then one of them laughed at me because I was about 8, because I had a patch on my dress. So that experience really sat with me, and I remember going to school thinking, you know what, what's the point? I might as well go and do something to just sell and make money, right? But in that very moment, I had a teacher who saw something in me. In that moment, she said, Wonga, you look so miserable. And then I explained and recited what just happened. And in that moment, she said, you know what, Wonga, you are enough. And then you are enough. And from that moment, my mindset shifted from, you know what, school is a waste of time, to think, you know what, because she kept telling me that. So when I think about measurement, sometimes it's short-term, medium-term, long-term. In this particular example of mine, it was in the short term, someone said something to me that truly shifted how I thought in the moment. And like over and over again, we've seen examples we almost focus, when we talk about impact, I think sometimes, for me, it's a double-edged sword. Yes, we talk impact, but sometimes we talk about demonstrate impact to the extent of those that want to do the work, but they don't have the jargon, they don't have the money, right? So we've seen examples, for example, in our line of work in Sierra Leone, when the fellows were placed in this particular community, every term in that particular communities, girls will be taken out of school for some traditional practices around female genital mutilation. But through talking to the community village heads, etc., it's now a law or a policy in that particular village that no girls would be taken out of the school. So in the short term, you could see, hey, this is some of the impact. But then when we talk long term, because I think earlier on I talked about some of this investment is long term. So we see, like, I think in some of the communities where our places fellows, like over 10, 12, 15 years, when you follow some of those girls who were invested deeply, you think you could see a difference, in terms of the way they think when you compare to their mothers and their grandmothers. And you almost, when we check some of those girls, I think there's lots of research around it as well, you know, the way they started thinking about marriage, like, whether getting married early or not, the different decisions around children, pregnancy, how many kids do I have, and the knowledge that they were able to have. So these are all some of the issues around long term. This is the impact of investment in education. Of course, people talked a lot around, we need to have this matrix, how many of this, how many of that. But beyond, I could sit here and tell you 50 matrices that we've used, but I think at the core of it is that how is the life of this girl changing? So I think if people almost uncomplicate this and think about how are the lives of this girl changing, like in terms of the mindsets, in terms of how they're talking with us, like even simple things around this community, kids could not even read or write, whether it's English or something else, but seeing those shifts and tracking them long term, one thing that I would say in terms of what we've seen work is that when in the lives of these children, there's a presence of leaders or teacher leaders who help unleash their leadership, we've seen that is one of the strategies long term that really perpetuates and cements this whole kind of agenda that we are trying to do around girls' ed. So I'm just trying to run away from matrix and say this matrix works. So that's a roundabout way of saying I haven't answered your question.
Why are women always running away from metrics? This is the problem. Thank you so much. Liddy, outside of formal education, what other factors do you think help advance the opportunities for women and girls in Africa?
For me, it's really two things. I think it's mentorship and network. At AIMS, for example, we have what we call the Next Extension Forum, which is a forum that brings scientists, young scientists of African descent from all over the world. And they come once every 2 years to discuss about their research, their work, and what they are working on in different fields. So that's the importance of networks is extremely, extremely important in the sense that today, especially with the pandemic, we cannot continue working in silos. You have to work in a community. You have to work with others. And let me tell you another personal story. I'm an entrepreneur at heart, and 9 years ago, I just had my son, who is 9-year-old now, and I was looking for a preschool for him. He was 18 months, and I went around Kigali, and most of the nicest schools that I really liked were charging $10,000 a year. And I thought to myself, but why? This is nursery, this is a daycare, seriously. So, as many entrepreneurs, when there is a problem, we find a solution. So, I started a small school using the Montessori pedagogy, which is a pedagogy that I really love. I had trained in Montessori for 2 years. I was a Montessori teacher. I was like, let me start with my son. Within 6 months, I had 60 children. And within a year, I had 2 schools. 9 years later, I have 12 schools. When you are part of a network, when you are part of a community, when you see problems, you want to solve those problems. Entrepreneurs, that's what we do. We see a problem, we want to solve it. But that journey is very, very hard. It's a very lonely journey. When you're a founder, when you're a managing director, you don't want to show your employees or your colleagues how hard it is for you to get that overdraft, for example, from a bank, for you to start another business or to pay your suppliers. So who do you talk to? Mentors are extremely important. Not only mentors who are successful, but also mentors who have failed. Because when you also have mentors who have failed, you can learn about the things that you should not do. It's so important to look for people and build this community of people who can support you, who can talk about their failures, because it is important. I see many entrepreneurs in this room, and I'm sure they have many stories of failures than stories of successes. And we need to start talking about those stories of failures. Because when you fail, especially when you're passionate about what you're doing, yes, you fail today, but the next day you wake up, and because you're so passionate about what you do, my case is education. I love what I do in the space of education. at the tertiary level, at the preschool level. I just love it. When it's very hard, I just remember, why am I doing this? Even if I was not paid today, I will still doing it. I will still be doing it. So it's important to make sure that you have people around you, a good support system of mentors, that you are part of networks, that you hear about what is going on in your field of business, what are the best practices, what is not working, and just be also okay to be vulnerable. It's so important to show your vulnerability, this word, because as women, we tend to portray this face that we got all right. Everything is going well. At home, everything is well. At school, everything is well. At work. It's not true. You cannot have it all. At least I cannot have it all. You know, and you have to be okay with it, right? You have to be okay with it. You have to be okay with the fact that in some areas, things will be 50%. In other areas, things will be 100%. And it is okay. And lastly, I want to say, take care of yourself. It's so important to take care of yourself, your mental health, your physical health. Eat healthy. It's so important. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I really related with a lot of that because, you know, I find that when we talk about these things, we always ask women, how do you balance it all? Can you have it all? But we never have to ask men those questions. Right. Balancing being a career woman and being a mother and all those things, like, it's very complicated. And you're right, you can't have it all at the same time. For example, my daughter is on half-term here with me because I have to be here. But it leads me to my next question to Debola. What is the role of men in helping to close the gender gap? Because I'm a believer that we need more male champions. We need people who have been there, who have succeeded, who have failed, you know, before us, that can show us what to do. How do we build wealth? How do we negotiate better? How do we get ahead? How do you feel? Because it's very, not strange. Strange is not the word, but it's not usual for men to write books that are targeted at women. So what inspired you to do this? And, you know, how do you feel like men can play a bigger role in closing the gender gap?
Thank you. A number of things. One is I'm quite reflective, and I try hard not to take people's credit because I'm confident in myself, my abilities, and my performance. And I think it's one of the key ways that men can support women. When I was starting out my business, my journey over 20 years ago, as a very young man, I had many women who supported me, from the likes of Dr. Obi Ezekwesili to Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, you know, nearer time to the likes of my dear Auntie Osai Alile in the room. You know, I have many women allies, and they supported me in my journey because women are nurturers. And women can see you when you're a seed because they take care of babies and know that that baby will become something in the future. Yes, a round of applause for women. Men are more used to seeing you when you're sprouting or when you're a tree. Then it can help you multiply, and there's nothing wrong with that. But you must understand the seasons, you know. And it's something to know that, anyway, I'll come back to that, let me not digress. So in understanding and appreciating the value and investment of women in my life, I'm able to confidently be an advocate and champion for women. That's one. Two, men generally, because of ego, are not all the time honest in giving women credit. And you see it happen at work often. And so if you sit in this room and you truly say you're a woman champion, or you want gender equality, then don't be afraid to give women credit at work. That's one thing you must do as a man. Be aware of privileges. I'm aware of the privileges that the world throws at me because I'm a man. Stop acting like you don't know about it, my brothers. It's there. Be aware. When you're aware of it, then take active steps on how to balance it. And that's why I spoke earlier about a business case. So even for women, we must do a lot more in showing men the business case on why they need women at the table. When you're aware of your privileges, then you make active and conscious steps to balance it. The next point is men must also model, especially even at home. Men must model what they want the society and the world to look like. They must model to their boys the kind of men that they want them to be. I wrote this book for girls, and I've been giving it to a lot of women and girls. And then T.Y. Bello, the photographer in Nigeria, came to me and said, thank you so much for this book for my boys. Since they read the book, they've been treating women differently. So we need to tell men more stories. We need to tell our little boys that your little sister is not someone you kick. She will hold her chest and cry or fall on the floor. She actually is Queen Amina. She's Queen Nzinga. And she can give you a sidekick and you will just fall. The boys need to know that. We need to speak to men as men. I'm going to go with this cliche statement. Forgive me, but I have to say it. When you want to advertise beer, you don't really have women advertise beer. Only when you want to advertise the beer to women. When you want to advertise beer, you have men advertising beer. Because you want men to change their habits of drinking a particular brand to that particular brand. If you want men to change their disposition to engaging with women, then you men in the room who claim to be allies must no longer be closeted. You must come out. You must make bold and be proud to let your male counterparts know. And the final thing I'm going to say is that the journey for gender equity is a religion. You must practice it. You can't say it today and not do it tomorrow. If you're going to do your 5 prayers in a day, if you're going to say your prayers in the morning to your God, then you've got to practice this. And so sometimes you might miss it because those who do 5 prayers a day sometimes don't do it all. But you must remember that it's a religion and a commitment, and therefore you must practice it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So before we go to the Q&A session for the audience, I'd like to ask each speaker to share one practical strategy that we can employ to accelerate investing in girls in Africa.
I think it's the coalition of supports. As I mentioned earlier, it takes a number of different layers to address the problem. So that coalition of support of, setting together, local government, police, ministries of education, schools, NGOs, how do we come together to form a solution that's bigger than one organization or bigger than one individual?
Yeah, I think for me it would be that you are part of the solution and you need others to really tackle this challenge around girls' education.
Oh, for me, it's really be engaged, make your voice be heard, loud and clear.
Okay, all right. There was a question that wanted me to answer, so I'm just going to, since we're wrapping up, answer it, which is policy to influence education. And I'm going to try to be brief, but I need to speak to the women here. Policies and bills are passed in government. So you must begin to pay attention closely to how to get into government, into the room. The first thing I find is that women don't fund women. And you said it earlier, you go to a woman will go to some man to fund her election. Women, you've got to begin to channel the money you invest in community building and channel it as well in building women to a pathway that can create policies that will reduce the burden where you have to begin to create a lot of money for educating girls privately. Because if the policies are fixed, your problems are caused by lack of policies. So women must begin to take the risk and fund other women that want to go into government. That's one. 2, women must negotiate their partnerships better. In campaigns in Nigeria, you find the women on the street dancing with the men, galvanizing market women, galvanizing women across the country. Women come out in numbers, throngs to vote for men in election. Then after the men win, women wait for the men to tell them what they deserve. It must no longer be like that. When you want to give any man your vote, as a group, sit him down and ask him, how many seats are we getting? How many members of House are we getting? How many ministerial appointments are we getting? That is the way, the only way that we can change this. Women must fight back. There are many things that men get away with in government. Blue murder, and I'm not asking women to become bad, but women are quick to criticize. Oh, you, one woman went there and you've gone to disgrace us. Many men make mistakes and they get away with it. Rally around her, not to encourage bad behavior, but find the legalese way around it, because men do it all the time. Women must fight back. Let women not go into office and they're quickly pinned down, shut down, and sent out. you are allowing it. I spoke earlier about boys' club. If you want policies to get education working, you need to create your own boys' club. You need to have your girls' club. It is not fun any longer for you to be at the table as a woman alone. It's no longer fun. When decisions are being made, let there be other women that understand your perspective and share your story to be able to advocate for that bill, for that policy. And so you must begin to create channels and ways to churn out more women and more girls on the table. There's more, but there's no time. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. That was so insightful. We'll take questions now, quickly.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to listen to you. I am Aminata Kamara, and I work with Purposeful. I think I have few comments, really, when it comes to girls' education, and it really goes to the philanthropic space of how we view girls. We mostly make justification of why girls should be educated, in fact, and which is problematic. Why do we need to make cases of if girls are educated, they give back? If girls are educated, they nurture more, they raise kids like their kids are well raised. Like why girls can't be educated for themselves because they are equal human beings, just as their male counterparts. Why girls can't have access to spaces to represent themselves as human beings who have lived reality, who are part of the community. Why do we have to justify the education of girls? And I think we do it a lot at philanthropic, in the philanthropic space, as civil society, as parents. When we raise our kids, you know, the opportunities we expose boys to are not the same that we expose girls to. We constantly keep justifying why girls should be girls and why girls should have access.
I just need to say quickly that we must meet our continent where it is. Even religion justifies with storytelling. You must be aware that the continent you're in, the world we're in now, you need those justifications. So it's important. Let's not get it mixed up. It's indeed the right of women to be educated, but if at the moment it is skewed, what do we do to get it balanced first before we begin to now talk generally about just because?
Can we take one more question? By question, no.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, and thank you for the wonderful panel. I'm going to try and make it short. It's not a question. 2018, I released my second book, International Courts and the African Woman Judge, Unveiled Narratives. I changed it from unveiled stories, and I used the word narratives. Why? Because my co-editor at that time told me, why do you just want to write a book and glorify African women judges? And I said, goodbye. So I found a new co-editor. In a nutshell, this book looked at 8 women judges across the continent who had served or were serving on international courts, including the first African woman from Uganda to serve at the International Court of Justice. It is not just a story. So the point is, storytelling is good. Storytelling is endemic to the continent of Africa. We call it oral history. Yeah. And the sister from Haiti mentioned it. But let's be careful. There will be those who will tell you your story doesn't matter. Yes. It's just a story. Why do you want to tell the story? But the next time you turn around, they would have written that book. So everyone here, let's keep telling the story of African women, but let's own it, because within the African system of storytelling, it is our rightful place to do, and we will do it.
Arisa,
Yeah.
just to comment a little bit on storytelling and perspectives. I went to an all-women's college, and it was incredibly empowering to read about every life event from a woman's perspective. I'd never, the World War, like every historical event, we read it from a woman's perspective, and it was incredibly empowering to get that. So I agree that that storytelling is important, and it is something that we as a continent and philanthropies, when you give money to universities and to schools, to make sure that there's that balance in storytelling, that the schools that you're funding are also funding the stories of women leaders. That's the only way young girls will be able to see the role models and be empowered.
I wanted to say quickly, I actually find some of our discussions personally disturbing. In particular, what you're saying, my brother, that form your own clubs, form this and that, because we're almost working from the assumption that women and men have got the same level playing field, that if you've got your own girls club and then you do XYZ, things are the same. And then if we also operate from a position around, let's meet our continent where it is, I feel it's one of the reasons why, you know, it's almost rearranging chairs. So I just wanted to just name it around, you know what, some of the mindsets that we might have are what has gotten us here. And if we are not careful, we'll continue to rearrange chairs. And this needs our whole overhaul around those mindsets, around how do we really make things happen. And yes, men and women, we are not starting from the same playing field, because for generations and generations, men have operated under privilege. So I just wanted to challenge that, because it really did disturb me slightly.
Okay, sorry, quickly I'll add to that, because I hear you, but I feel like both facts can exist side by side.
It must be together.
Because especially, don't mansplain, especially because networks are important. Yes, you're right, women and men don't start from the same levels, but you know, networking is not always looking for the person that's higher than you. So I don't always have to look for an Osai Alile. I need to grow my network of people who are on my level that have weaknesses where I have strengths, where I have strengths where they have weaknesses, and we come together to further our own agenda. Because yes, we don't start from the same place, but women have a very big role when they collaborate to compete. Thank you so much, everyone. This has been such an insightful panel. I want to encourage us to be champions of investing in the education of the girl child, especially in Africa. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much indeed. Can we give them a big round of applause one more time? Thank you so much for the two plenaries, Plenary 2 and Plenary 3. Now, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your time. We're now going to break for lunch at Soko Restaurant. Following lunch, we're going to go into the breakout sessions in the following rooms. Now, lunch stops at 3, so we need everybody back. We need everybody